on First at 9 this Friday, the 7th of June, 2024. Transforming tomorrow. Economic Transformation Bill is the first step in bringing Sri Lanka's economy back on track, claims the President. Asserts that the country will be out of bankruptcy within the next few months. Acts and threats. Public Debt Management Bill passed in Parliament to prevent Sri Lanka from repeating past sins, says Finance State Minister. Meanwhile, MP Dr. Harsha De Silva demands Speaker of Parliament to take responsibility if he is assassinated. Smooth sailing. Talks with bondholders positive despite lack of an agreement, highlights Finance State Minister. Promises to present a report on talks with ISB holders to Parliament. Looming verdict. International Monetary Fund's Executive Board to hold second review of Sri Lanka's economic reform program.
ඔබේ විශ්වාසය දිනු සෙන්සුරයින් දැන් ළඟමැති ෆාමසියෙන් ලබාගත හැක.
This is Ada Derana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to Ada Derana First at 9. I'm Aditya Singha joining you live with the latest in Sri Lanka and around the world. Now taking you straight to your top story this evening, President Ranil Wickremesinghe says that even though the country will emerge out of bankruptcy within the next few months, Sri Lanka must not become complacent with its achievement and must strive for long-term economic stability. The head of state highlighted achieving sustainable growth in gross domestic product, reducing the unemployment rate and creating an export-oriented economy as key factors in achieving sustainable economic growth. He added that the recently tabled Economic Transformation Bill will ensure continuity in the pursuit of these targets in spite of regime changes.
President Ranil Wickremesinghe yesterday inaugurated the manufacturing plant of the locally produced cephalosporin injectable antibiotic and also unveiled the Meldol Reliable Relief Pharmaceutical Drug Manufacturing Facility in Ekala. The new production facilities were initiated by the Melva Group Sands Active Private Limited.
බංකොලොත් භාවයෙන් පිට වෙනවා. ඒකෙන් අවසානයක් වෙන්නේ නැහැ. අපි එක තැන හිටියොත් ආපහු අපි වැටෙනවා.
We will come out of bankruptcy within the next few months. However, that is not the end of this process. If we stagnate, we will once again fall into the same trap. We must move forward. In order to move forward, there are certain steps the government has to take. To that end, I have presented the Economic Transformation Bill to Parliament. Through that piece of legislation, I have outlined a number of economic targets. The first of which is to achieve a 5% growth rate in the gross domestic product by 2027. After 2027, that rate must increase even further. If the country is to develop, we must maintain a 7 to 8% GDP growth rate for at least 15 years. The next target is to reduce the rate of unemployment to 5% by 2025. Finally, we must transform the economy into an export-oriented one by 2040. I do not make these claims lightly. These are targets which have been set out for us in the IMF agreement. Now these targets will be etched into law. Whichever government that comes into power must follow this path. I myself have taken the initial steps in this process. First, the agriculture sector must be modernized. We must transform agriculture into an export-oriented industry by introducing smart agriculture. Secondly, we have to invest in the tourism sector. We are now providing loans to the youth in order to start tourism-related businesses. The third step is developing vocational training institutions. We will completely overhaul state-run vocational training institutions in order to meet the demands of the employment market. Finally, the government will invest in the IT sector. Our main aim is to produce over 50,000 IT professionals in Sri Lanka before 2030. However, the most pressing need is creating new industries. We are trying to create new industrial zones. We will create a national authority for this purpose. The Katunayake Export Processing Zone only spans 400 acres. We will create a 1,000-acre zone in Bingiria and a 3,000-acre zone in Hambantota. Apart from those, there are over 1,500 acres available in the north and another 2,000 acres available in Trincomalee. Not only that, we will create a separate commission to promote investments. The purpose of all these development projects is to create a better future for the youth of this nation. We cannot be a nation of debtors forever. We have to show that we can stand on our own as a country.
අපි හැමදාම ණය ගන්න જાතියක් වෙන්න අපි ලැජ්ජ වෙන්න ඕනේ. අපි අපේ සෝෂක්තියෙන් අපි පෙන්නමු අපිටත් මේක කරන්න පුළුවන් කියලා.
Less sugar, same great taste. From Melbourne.
Now, the International Monetary Fund's Executive Board will meet on the 12th of this month to discuss the second review of Sri Lanka's economic reform program. During a press briefing in Washington, D.C., IMF spokesperson Julie Kozak noted that the island nation has achieved sufficiently strong progress in terms of its debt restructuring process. Kozak added that the international lender has a strong expectation that Sri Lanka will reach agreements with its external commercial creditors soon, consistent with the IMF's program parameters.
IMF staff and the Sri Lankan authorities reached staff-level agreement on economic policies to conclude the second review. As noted, on June 12th, the Executive Board will meet to discuss the second review and the Article 4 consultation. In Sri Lanka, we do see macroeconomic policy reforms starting to bear fruit. Commendable outcomes include rapid disinflation, robust reserve accumulation, and initial signs of economic growth while preserving stability of the financial system. Program performance is strong, with most quantitative and structural conditionality for the second review met or implemented with delay, and reforms are still ongoing in some areas. The next steps on the debt restructuring are indeed to conclude negotiations with external commercial creditors and to implement agreements in principle with the official creditors. The domestic debt operations are largely completed. Debt restructuring discussions are continuing. More specifically, the authorities have been holding extensive discussions with external official creditors regarding an MOU with the official creditor committee and the final agreements with the Export-Import Bank of China. Discussions with external bondholders continue with the aim of reaching agreements in principle soon. Negotiations with the China Development Bank are also at an advanced stage. There is a strong expectation that agreements with external commercial creditors consistent with program parameters will be reached soon. So overall, we assess that there has been sufficiently strong progress on the debt restructuring front.
මැලිබන් කිරි නිෂ්පාදන මිලදීගෙන මරණයට කැපවූ කිරි ගවයින් නිදහස් කර ගැනීමට ඔබත් දායක වන්න.
State Minister of Finance Shrihan Semasinghe, who outlined the progress of the negotiations pertaining to the restructuring of Sri Lankan debt in Parliament, assured today that a report pertaining to the restructuring of international sovereign bonds will be presented to Parliament once the process concludes. He made those comments against a backdrop of foreign media reports that Sri Lanka and a group of creditors are in talks over a deal aimed at restructuring the nation's debt with its bilateral lenders. Recently, Bloomberg reported that Sri Lanka and a group of creditors are in advanced talks over a deal aimed at restructuring the nation's debt with bilateral lenders. Quoting people familiar with the matter, Bloomberg stated that the government and members of the official creditor committee are exchanging draft versions of the accord or memorandum of understanding. Further, one of the sources stated that the documents are needed to finalize an agreement reached in November between Sri Lanka and the official creditor committee and to hash out the few remaining issues before a deal is settled. Against this backdrop, State Minister of Finance Shrihan Semasinghe brought the country's legislature up to speed today on the present status of Sri Lanka's debt restructuring effort.
So far, we have reached agreements in principle with Sri Lanka's bilateral creditors that represent the official creditor committee, which includes the Paris Club Secretariat, and China, which is outside that group. The other area of focus is Sri Lanka's negotiations with its bondholders. Even though we have not reached an agreement, talks with the bondholders on restructuring are positive. At the Committee on Public Finance, Dr. Harsha De Silva has supported approving proposals tabled by the government. He also recommended certain changes, and the government made some of those wherever possible. What Dr. Harsha De Silva is trying to highlight is that the government has agreed to a 7% haircut with international sovereign bondholders.
Haircut that we have agreed for a 7% haircut with the ISP holders. I think the point which I am trying to raise is, when the negotiations and the discussions are going on, it is not fair for some outsider to come and, of course you have all the right to say what you want to say, it is not fair to come and make a description on what the government's decision is going to be. All the restructuring process was approved in Parliament, and once the discussions were concluded, we have presented the report on the discussion. So similarly, once the discussions with the ISP holders are concluded, the ongoing discussions, we will certainly report to Parliament, because it is good for all the members to know what the outcome is.
Now, meanwhile, the Public Debt Management Bill was passed in Parliament today. According to State Minister of Finance Shrehan Semasinghe, the bill will provide for public debt management, including the authorization to borrow, issue and service public debt for the government. The State Minister added that it will enable issuing guarantees on lending and entering into suppliers' credit and financial lease agreements for the establishment of the Public Debt Management Office and for matters connected therewith. With that, let's take a look at today's parliamentary proceedings. With regard to the controversial issue pertaining to the handing over of visa operations to a foreign company, the officials involved were summoned to the Committee on Public Finance. However, they did not appear before the committee on that particular day. I then claimed that they violated privileges. Later, there was a news report stating that I met the company's officials and struck a deal with them to conceal the matter. How can that happen? Who is responsible for those assertions? Who is behind the effort to turn this issue on me? I could very well be assassinated while I travel. If that happens, the Speaker of Parliament has to take on the responsibility of my life over to his shoulders.
Through the Public Debt Management Bill, we expect to change the existing mechanism on debt management and hand it over to a centralized mechanism to ensure that Sri Lanka's debt will never reach an unsustainable level. By 2022, Sri Lanka's debt level accounted for 128% of its GDP. We aim to reduce it to 95% by 2032. The government's gross financing needs accounted for 34.6% of the country's GDP. We aim to reduce it to 13% by 2032. By 2022, the government's annual debt servicing stood at 9.4% of its GDP. We aim to reduce it by 4.5%. The International Monetary Fund and creditors have supported us based on those three conditions. The chairman of the Committee on Public Finance claimed that he could be assassinated if he requested security. You have to be cautious of the people in your own party. They might be attempting to create a facade that certain factions of the government are trying to threaten you because they fear that you will join the government. It was MP Nalaka Godaheva who provided advice to then President Gotabaya Rajapaksa on economics and governance. Now he has joined all of you. My question is whether it is Nalaka Godaheva who is threatening Dr. Harsha De Silva or if it is someone else who wants to join the Economic Council of the SJB. Keep in mind that all of you will experience a fate similar to Gotabaya Rajapaksa's, since all those responsible for it are by your side now.
මට කියන්න වෙන්නේ මීට අවුරුදු දෙකකට කලින් හිටපු ජනාධිපතිතුමාට වෙච්ච ඉරණම ඔබතුමාලට අප් වෙන්න වැඩි කාලයක් යන්නේ නැහැ. එතුමාට උපදෙස් දීපු සියලු දෙනා අද ඔබතුමාලගේ කරට අත දාගෙන උපදෙස් දෙන තැනට ගිහිල්ලා තියෙනවා.
And the Department of Meteorology forecasts a slight increase in rain in the southwestern part of the country within the next few days from tomorrow. Meanwhile, Director of the Disaster Management Centre, Pradeep Kodipilli, claims that the grant of the 10,000 rupee allowance provided for flood-affected households can be obtained after securing a Grama Niladhari certificate and a recommendation. According to official figures, 24 deaths have been reported so far due to inclement weather, while 206,203 individuals have been affected.
Although the floods prompted by the recent heavy rains have begun to subside, several areas around rivers Kalu, Ging and Nilwala remain submerged. Due to the effect of the floods around the Ging River, tea estates around Nagoda Kaprupanawa, Unanvitiya and Mapalagama were destroyed. Residents of Puakpitiya Egodoyana meanwhile were affected and houses were completely damaged due to the overflow of the Aswatwoya. As the severe weather continued undeterred, 24 deaths were reported, while the number of affected individuals was reported at a staggering 206,203. 60 houses were completely damaged and around 5,348 houses were partially damaged. The Disaster Management Centre stated that 5,162 people belonging to 1,288 families are currently housed in 83 shelters. Meanwhile, Kegal District Secretary Ranjana Jayasinghe stated that a section of the Colombo Kandy Main Road in Pahala Kaduganna will be closed from time to time tomorrow tomorrow in order to remove boulders and branches from the road.
We will have to close the road off from time to time after 9:30 am to remove tree branches from the road. We will start removing the boulder after 2 pm. After 6 pm, we will have to close the Colombo Candy Road off in Pahalakadugannawa region for several hours.
In the meantime, health experts have noted a rise in dengue cases resulting from the recent exacerbation of inclement weather.
අප්‍රේල් මාසේ 7.5ක් වගේ සාමාන්‍ය අගයකට තිබිච්ච කීට ගණනත්තේ දැන් මැයි මාසේ අග වෙද්දී 10.6ක වගේ වැඩි ප්‍රමාණයකට කීට ගණනත්තේ වැඩි වෙලා තියෙනවා.
Predicting weather patterns in the near future, the Department of Meteorology forecasts a slight increase in rain in the southwestern part of the country in the next few days.
Now, as inclement weather proceeds to affect Sri Lankan households, Manusat Derana's disaster relief effort programs continued for the 5th consecutive day today, aiding people affected by the heavy rains. Manusat Derana team distributed dry rations to people who were affected by adverse weather in the Thabuana area. Dry rations were also provided to Sri Abhinavayarama for people who were affected by disaster in Ihela Kudaligama. The program is carried out by Manusat Derana in partnership with Dialogue. Now, the police special task force officials arrested a 29-year-old individual with 19 grams of crystal methamphetamine on the Buttala Higurak Kadua road. With that, let's take a look at some other local news in brief. A couple stole a purse of a female police officer who arrived at the Wadua police station to file a complaint. The police claims that the suspects were arrested yesterday. The Kasbah police arrested a 22-year-old engaged in motorcycle theft with his brother. During his arrest, the Kasbah police confiscated 5,200 milligrams of heroin in the arrestee's possession. Meanwhile, during an inspection, a suspicious individual was nabbed by the police near the Kospalanna bridge in Piliyandala with a stock of crystal methamphetamine in his possession. In the subsequent police interrogation, it was revealed that the suspect was wanted by the authorities for stealing necklaces and motorcycles. A CCTV camera recorded the suspect robbing the gold necklace of a shop owner in Kolamunna yesterday. Welcome back. Now, several train services have been cancelled today due to the strike action launched by the Locomotive Operating Engineers Union. The strike, which began at midnight last night, was launched in protest of issues related to the promotion of locomotive drivers and continuous delays in recruitment. Meanwhile, the ongoing strike caused significant disruptions, especially for commuters returning home in the afternoon, including many office workers.
The Locomotive Operating Engineers Union of Sri Lanka Railways launched the strike effective from midnight yesterday. According to the union, the trade union action is being carried out over delays in second-class promotions of locomotive drivers and several other issues. According to the secretary of the union, SRCM Sena Nayaka, only locomotive drivers from 2 of the 5 running sheds have joined the strike. He added that as a result of the strike, there will be no power set trains operating. The railway department stated that due to the strike, 32 train journeys were cancelled in the morning alone. In the meantime, members of the Locomotive Operating Engineers Union met this afternoon and discussed their future course of action.
We were not given an opportunity to meet with the minister or any authorities until now. We will continue the strike until we get answers to our questions.
Accordingly, it was decided to continue the strike. However, several trains were put into operation this afternoon. Speaking to Ada Derana, Additional General Manager of Railways, V.S. Polvattagay stated that the Department of Railways has invited serving and retired locomotive drivers to cover office trains covering all routes in the evening. He also stated that the department hopes to invite more retired locomotive drivers and add more trains for operation.
We know that in 2021, the Department of Railways made a loss of 10.3 billion rupees. In 2022, it was 12.4 billion rupees. Why are they inconveniencing the public while continuously making losses? The union must act in a more responsible manner.
Sri Lanka's official reserve assets were recorded at $5.42 billion in May 2024. According to the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, this is a marginal drop by 0.9% compared to $5.47 billion in April 2024. The central bank stated that the reserve includes proceeds from the swap with the People's Bank of China, equivalent to around $1.4 billion, which is subject to conditionalities on usability. Now in other business news, the all-share price index edged up today as a result of price gains in counters such as Commercial Bank, Nations Trust Bank and Hatton National Bank, with turnover crossing 1.2 billion rupees. During the week, the all-share price index and the S&P Sri Lanka 20 gained 1.7% and 2.4% respectively, while recording an average daily turnover of 1.13 billion rupees. The S&P Sri Lanka 20 meanwhile closed in green. High net worth and institutional investor participation were noted in Hatton National Bank, Sampath Bank and People's Leasing and Finance. Mixed interest was observed in Access Engineering, Haley's and DFCC Bank, while retail interest was noted in Brown Investment and Prime Lands Residencies and the Cooperative Insurance Company. The banking sector was the top contributor to market turnover, followed by the capital goods sector. Foreign participation in market activity remained at subdued levels, with foreigners closing as net sellers. Now let's take a look at the rupee exchange rates during the day. Now in your corporate developments, Chairperson of TJ Lanka PLC, Ajit Gunawardena, highlighted the importance of product diversification and innovation in the company's growth strategy and assured their commitment to delivering long-term value to stakeholders. With that, let's take a look at some corporate news in brief.
The chairman of TJ Lanka PLC, Ajit Gunawardena, says that the company is anticipating an upward trajectory in the upcoming years, with a clear path mapped out to reach a $300 million revenue target. In its annual report for the financial year 2023-24, Gunawardena also highlighted the importance of product diversification and innovation in the company's growth strategy and assured their commitment to delivering long-term value to stakeholders. The chairperson added that the company has implemented several strategies to address short-term challenges and maintain profitability. Meanwhile, Chairman of HNB PLC, Rajiv Dissanayake, assured their commitment to creating sustainable value for their stakeholders with a firm resolve and a progressive mindset. In its annual report for 2023-24, the chairman said that the company will inspire greater heights of success and prosperity in the coming years following the milestones achieved in the past years. Also in corporate, Ambien Holdings PLC announced the appointment of Ching Tak Tsoi as an independent non-executive director of the company with effect from the 4th of June. In its disclosure, the company stated that the newly appointed director does not hold any shares of the company as at the date of his appointment.
That's all the news we have for you tonight. Thank you. Have a great night.